I think good native advertising is a mix of the publisher's voice and the brand's voice. And truly native, of course, takes on the look and the feel of the publisher. And that's why a brand is coming to a publisher to make this content together so that the readers of, for example, for Mashable, our audience, they've come to expect a certain kind of quality, a certain type of content. And so when my team, the brand and content team, makes content for brands, it's in that same style, it's in that same voice, but it's in partnership with a brand. So I think for native to be as successful as it can be, it's a really good partnership, and the brands really will trust us and let their voice sing through our voice. One recent example that my team at Mashable created was in partnership with Netflix for the latest season of Black Mirror, and we did a site redesign. So Mashable is usually very, very bright, and it's white and blue, and for Black Mirror, which is all about sort of the dark future of technology and what may happen in the not so distant future. So we redesigned our website. It was a big team collaboration. The website was dark, and we created a lot of content that could live in this same time as Black Mirror takes place. And so for that, it worked really well because it was such a good fit for our audience with the focus on tech, but it also was very clear that it was a partner content, which I think is also very important, that we're not misleading our audience. Partners are also coming to us because we've developed this trust in our audience, and we have this audience, and we need to be clear on where the content is coming from, but also in a way that will be interesting and entertaining to our audience. Native should be in the voice of the publisher above all, and I think if a brand partner is trying to sort of shoehorn their message into the content a little too much, the reader is going to know that, and the reader is going to say, okay, this is an advertisement. I don't want to read this. This isn't providing me any value. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is always who your end reader is, and is this going to be valuable to them? And tell it in a story in a way that's going to add value, and don't try to, sort of shoehorn the message in there. When brands come to publishers to create content together, to create native advertising, for Mashable, brands come to us because of who our audience is, and they want to reach that audience, and we're the experts in creating content for that audience. So when we're developing a program with a partner, we'll tell them, oh, this type of audience, this type of content performs really well with our audience. This is why we're recommending this talent to use. This is why we're recommending this style of an infographic, because we know that our audience really is going to respond to that, and they're going to enjoy consuming content like that. So we definitely will share those sort of insights and nuggets about what we know to help to create the most compelling content that we can. With native advertising, I think the real reason that a brand wants to work with a publisher is to get to that publisher's audience. And as the publisher, we know our audience the best. So that's the real value of working with a Mashable, because we have so much data and so much insights on our audience, and when they're consuming stuff, how they're consuming it, what headline is going to do better. And so because of that, and because of all of this data that we have about our audience, we can really make the best content for our audience. With Mashable, our audience isn't just on our site. Our audience is on social, and we really value our audience wherever they are, and not just expecting them to come to Mashable.com, but we're with them on Twitter, on Facebook, on Snapchat Discover. And I think in the current state of the media, it's very important to know that and talk to your audience where they are. You're not going to build a shop in the middle of nowhere and expect people to just show up and meet you there. You're going to build a shop where people already are and where the traffic is. So that's sort of the same way that we approach native. We'll make content that will be on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and I think that just makes our audience even larger, and that's where they're sharing, that's where they already are. So I think that's an important thing to think about. The important thing with native and with making sure that your audience will receive it well is being very clear and upfront that it is sponsor content and that it is partner content. I think The times that the audience isn't as excited about it is if they feel like they've been misled. So we're always very clear, this is partner content, this is paid, this is in partnership with Netflix, because we don't want to mislead anybody and have anyone think that our editorial team is endorsing something because it's something that the branded content team has made. I think our audience, when you make any good content, they'll like it. So our audience has really embraced a lot of the campaigns we've done, because it's something that we work really hard to, it's following the Mashable voice, it's following the Mashable style, and we only want to put things out there that we'll be proud of. So our audience is generally pretty pleased with it. My team, the branded content team at Mashable, we're the ones responsible for our custom content and our native advertising campaigns. And we actually are under the overall umbrella of the content team. So we sit in the same family as our content team. Separate, but under the same overall leadership, which I think is very important because our content follows those same standards and guidelines. But we do keep separate in that we don't want nothing that my team is working on should ever influence what the editorial team is going to choose to cover or not choose to cover. So we're pretty careful about keeping that separate. The thing to always think about when adding the social layer to any campaign is understanding what that platform is and the kinds of content that are there. You shouldn't put a bunch of still photos on YouTube, obviously, because people are on YouTube for video. For Facebook videos, obviously most people are watching those without the sound on, so it needs to be something that's audio agnostic, which is not the same case for YouTube. So I think for social, and when you're thinking about what platforms to expand your campaign to, what's the content you're doing, how should it live on those platforms, and making sure that you have a deep understanding of why you would even be going to that platform. I think when it comes to new social platforms that are just launching and whether or not you want to be the first one there, it really depends. It depends, I think, on your bandwidth and how big your team is. I don't think if there's something new in your one-person shop that you should try to be everywhere, because you won't be able to be successful. The bandwidth just won't be there. But with Mashable, we're always the first. We want to be the first to try the new platforms, and we have the team to do that. And because of our roots as a tech company and as a social company, it's important for us to sort of be out there and even be the ones helping our audience understand, what is this platform? What is, when Snapchat launched, how are we supposed to be using this? When Instagram launched Instagram stories, we were right there, explaining to our audience, because we were figuring it out too, which I think is also a good way for us to approach it in okay, what is this? How should we be using this? How is this the same? How is this different? And really, I think having reasonable expectations and being honest with yourself and where you think your audience is as well. With native on social, disclosure is of course important. And with some of these new platforms, it's totally the Wild West. Nobody has been there before. Nobody knows. There aren't rules because it's a brand new platform. And it's always important that you are being clear, that you're not misleading the viewer of the content. And I think I tell my team this, that we make content, we don't make commercials. And so if we're making a piece of content that's gonna live on Instagram, it shouldn't look like an advertisement. It should look and feel like a piece of content that as you're scrolling through your feed, a follower of Mashable's Instagram account won't be like, whoa, what is this? Why is this an ad in my feed? It should feel just like the rest of the content that we make. With social media and sort of figuring out which platform you should be investing in, it's important to know your audience. For example, I would not recommend to a luxury automobile brand to focus on Snapchat, because that audience of 13-year-old girls and boys probably isn't in the market to buy, a high-end luxury automobile. So to really understand who you're after and where they are and meet them there. When we think about the future of social, one thing that I do actually is I have a 12-year-old nephew, and it's okay, what's he doing? What are his friends doing? because that is sort of what's next. And you see this trend in, okay, Facebook, now parents are on there, now grandparents are on there. And so the younger audience doesn't want to be there anymore. And I think that's why Snapchat is there, and this sort of the almost like the normalization of some of these platforms, and the younger audience wants to be part of something that not everybody is part of. In terms of any threat to the future of Native, the only thing I would say is if we're not disclosing and if we're not being honest with our audience, we'll lose that trust, and that will make our audience go away. So it's so important to be clear and be transparent, and that's why we have the audience that we do, is because they trust us, and that's an important thing that we need to always keep in mind.